Good morning, ASEAN. Good morning, our plenary speaker, Mr. Le Quang Lan, Assistant Director, Head ICT and Tourism Division, Association of Southeast Asian Nation, ASEAN, of course. Plenary speakers, Ms. Ida C. Yuvenko, Director Board Management Information System Service, Department of Information and Communication Technology, Philippines, Dr. Sak. And Dr. Sak right now, in fact, he was listed as one of the world 100 most influential people in digital government. Is now the advisor, digital transformation at ETDA, representing Electronic Transaction Development Agency, and recently invited to lead on digital transformation function as advisor to ASEAN CIO Association, and he's from Thailand. And Mr. Stephen first. Steve is actually Consulting Director of Strategy and Architecture Public Sector from FPT Information System, Vietnam. And of course, Steve has a good brief of experience in international strategy, management, information specialist. You're gonna hear a lot from him. And distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Hong Sin, and I'm the one of the founding member of ASEAN CIO Association, and holding the function as Global Relationship Officer, as well the creator of Live Chat digital channel. Today, I will be the moderator and the facilitator. So firstly, allow me to address some logistics. As this is a public live chat, I would like to highlight that name, photos, or voice could be captured with PDPA, though in Thailand has been delayed for, or rather postponed to 1 more year later for enforcement. But because we are ASEAN CIO, we adhere to PDPA. So we like to emphasize as ASEAN CIO Association, we do not send or sell your contact detail to any third party, and it is under strict guideline on data access, even internally. So as you opt to sign up or have your staff to sign up for this session, which means to say you have consent us to reach you for any newsletters or email blasts or updates. So, but should you choose not to receive any of this, please drop us a note so that we can delete your contact permanently. Secondly, throughout the whole entire session, should you have any question, you can raise your hand under the participant icon. There's an icon that says raise your hand. You can click on that so we know that you like to come online. Or if you are too shy, you like to text your question in the group chat. There's also a group chat. So you can click on that and key in your question. So we will attend to your question after the plenary discussion. So ASEAN CIO is a non-profit organization set up by a pool of passionate CIOs with the intention of serving CIOs in the region and sharing their experience. So all the personnel in ASEAN CIO are volunteers, but yet, even we are volunteers, we have very strong alliances internationally, not just also within ASEAN. So we have yet formally open for membership, but we already have almost 5,000 ASEAN C-level contacts and outreach. As we continue to refresh the contacts through events and activities, because some may retire, some may, there will be changes and flow of CIO. So we keep it very updated. So aligning to upcoming ASEAN Digital Master Plan 2025, we will continue to drive several initiatives to launch into ASEAN, and we welcome your participation. We welcome your suggestion as well. So our flagship annual event has been set as one of the activities for regular information exchange, bridging towards like digital and information divide. So this year, the 8th forum, ASEAN CIO 8th forum that will span across like 2 to 3 days, has been identified to run with Vietnam Information Network and Software Association. In short, they are known as BINASA as co-hosts, scheduled in July 8 to 10. But we are still unsure whether if ASEAN flights would be open to enter into Vietnam. I know Vietnam is very ready for going back to work because they have no record of COVID-19. But we'll see how the whole flows goes, and we'll keep all of you updated. But this year, the theme forum is Digital Nation Moving Beyond Smartness, Demand Sustainability and Co-Creation. So other major events like CISO Forum in Indonesia also has been postponed. Date is not fixed. Hydroinformatics Forum, which is very popularly known globally as water, scheduled in Thailand. The Green Exchange Community is a 6 to 9 month program that we are rolling out in ASEAN, but starting in Thailand first, led by our Singapore counselor. Because of the pandemic situation, so ASEAN CIO Association must rethink and reframe our engagement model to serve ASEAN digital development, addressing digital divide to ASEAN CIO right now. So we opened this whole new channel of communication via Zoom webinar. Now that many of us are working from home as the new norm evolves, how will we use data to ensure integrity, quality, accessibility, backup, or should even an incident happen, how do we be able to effectively do a e-discovery to validate what has exactly happened? So there is a whole flow of conversation on the data aspect. So the whole world is basically filled with a lot of uncertainty, a lot of unpredictable surprise. Nobody expects COVID to happen, but it happens. So it changes a lot of things in terms of how we work from business angle, from government operation. So ASEAN live chat, ASEAN CIO third live chat basically emphasizes on our continuing intention to engage CIOs across the region. So in crises like this, we get to observe how digital communities actually matters and how we continue working with each other across the region, even if we physically do not fly there. So there are 9 channels of digital channels that has been demanded by the C-suite, and they are based namely business consulting channel that you'll be hearing from us, coaching channel, where we work closely with NUS, ISS, and probably our SUPD coming in. Cybersecurity channels that really focuses on all aspects of cybersecurity. We will invite gurus in this area. Cities and urbanization channel. Next week, we have a live chat that focuses on cities and urbanization. Digital transformation, which is one of the hot topics, DX channel. Digital water channel, as the whole world is talking about disaster coming from water. We have a very strong concern, and therefore we are looking into what technology could do in the water space. Digital fund is a very interesting channel, and green and sustainability channel, women and youth channel, which is one of the also demanded channel. So at the ASEAN Telmin meeting in December 2018, the ministers, they endorsed some ASEAN framework on digital data governance. So the minister has tasked the senior officer to actually further develop and implement this four strategic priorities under the framework to enhance digital capability and cooperation among ASEAN. And there are subjects that Indonesia has to look into data classification framework, Singapore that looks into cross-border data flow, Vietnam that has to work on digital innovation forum, and of course Philippines that looks into data protection and privacy forum. So as ASEAN CIO Association defines data governance as organizing framework for establishing objective, strategy, policy for managing data, just as you would like your corporate asset. So I must say that it's no easy task. In fact, when we roll out a survey during the registration, when we ask questions like, what is data governance? There are a good number of them, basically have very little idea about data governance. So this session itself would mean tremendous to the ASEAN contacts and connections to learn about data governance. So if you truly want to be successful with data governance, one must try to understand, the decisions are being made as well with, how the decisions are being made, as well as the organization structure to begin with, because communication is one of the key start of data governance. So as many of us know, data is fuel, data is corporate asset, data is treasure, and data is making its way, into various aspects of technology. And it drives the technology such as cloud, IoT, AI, machine learning to serve all the business demand. So understanding the data classification and having standards help to provide smoother deployment should any of the technology being adopted. So today's plenary, focuses on data governance, robustness, opens digital transformation as one core driver for ASEAN competitiveness. So data governance is the root of all digital transformation. So to begin with, I would like to invite our special guest, who will be sharing ASEAN digital data governance. So Mr. Loh Kwong Lan, Assistant Director, Head of ICT and Tourism Division, ASEAN, will be sharing some slides with us before we get on to the plenary discussion. So Mr. Lan, are you ready for the slide sharing? Do remember to turn on your microphone. Yeah.
Thank you, Hong Xin, for your introduction. I very much appreciate the active role of the ACOIA in the data governance matters, and I very much appreciate that how wide the associations have been reaching to a number of people and a number of experts and also CIO in many countries, not only in ASEAN. So I am. This is really the opportunity for me to better understand and better engage with the association, and I truly hope that the association will contribute a lot to the promotion of the digital transformation in ASEAN. So today meetings, I'm very pleased to talk to update you about the digital governance in ASEAN, and I would like to share some of my PowerPoint so that you can have an overlook, and I hope that it can help you to understand better what ASEAN has been doing and better how the association can continue contributing to the process. Now, I hope that everyone can see my screen. That is the
Yes.
topic that thank you very much. The topic that I want to talk is about the progress of the ASEAN digital governance framework. I thank Hong Sin for capturing some of the very key background of the initiative. This is one of the key and the most important initiative of ASEAN at this point in time. We hope that by having a strong framework and with the solid progress made in various ASEAN member countries, we truly have a free flow of data within the region, and that would be a basic for us to promote the so-called digital integration. Now, give you some hope. The digital transformation, it has been profoundly changing the landscape of production, consumption of, in ASEAN country, and bringing immense opportunity for the economic growth. And as you know very well, that even during the COVID-19, the transaction of the digital trade transaction has increased significantly in many countries, in Vietnam, in Thailand, in Indonesia. So actually that we are really go into an era where the digital transformation actually play a big role. So according to a study conducted by Google and Temasek, that the ASEAN digital trade has shot to $100 billion for the first time in 2019, and more than triple in size over the last 4 years, and thanks for more than 360 million internet users based in the region, and it grew to from 260 million. So you can see on the graph that on the diagram, you can see that there is the huge potential growth in the digital trade in ASEAN. And then similarly, that the gross media value of the digital trade in ASEAN amounted to 8.5% of the GDP, and up from 1.3% in 2015. And the digital trade is expected to grow over $3 billion by 2025. So this is really a big reward for the effort by business, and the reward to the government of ASEAN if we can advance further the foundation for the growth of the digital trade. Now, ASEAN digital agendas become more and more critical and more important in the agenda of the ASEAN integrations. Now, look at the components of the digital ASEAN digital agendas. There are 5 clusters of the enabling factors. One is the digital trade. The second, the infrastructure and innovation. The third is the data itself. The fourth is the digital inclusion and the cybersecurity. And I'm very pleased to see that the association have all the activities concerning all 5 components that ASEAN has been doing now. And I truly hope that actually that our work is really complementary each other. Now, today I'm talking really about the digital data governance, DDG. So the digital data governance framework actually based on it is developed based on some of the key documents that ASEAN has developed. The first one is the Master Plan on the ASEAN Connectivity in 2025, adopted by the ASEAN leader in 2016, that emphasize on the seamlessly and comprehensively connected and integrated ASEAN. And one of the 4 core pillars on the digital innovation comprised of a strategic objective to support enhance data management in ASEAN member states. So this is really the first basic document that put the data governance in the central in the center of the ASEAN integrations. The second document, which is really important, that maybe many of you are already aware, is that the ASEAN framework of personal data protection that also be endorsed by 2016 to provide the basic principle to strengthen the protection of the personal data in ASEAN. That is the guiding document. It's non-binding, but it gives the guiding, the basic guiding principle and direction for all ASEAN member countries. It is really flexible, that it encourages the bilateral or ASEAN minus approach in accordance with the readiness of a particular member ASEAN country. It in line with the international best practices that, for example, the OECD privacy framework, the APEC privacy framework, with a number of standards like consent, notification, purpose, accuracy of data, security, safeguard, and so on and so forth. And the last one, which is the most important one, that is the ASEAN framework on digital data governance, that was adopted in 2018 to enhance the data management, facilitate the harmonization of data regulation among ASEAN member states, and to promote the ASEAN intra-flow of data and initiate the so-called ASEAN cross-border data flow mechanism. Again, this document is non-binding, it's voluntary, but it incorporates all the elements of ASEAN data protection framework. It also very much in line with the current international best practices, like what in OECD, APEC, EU approach. So I just want to give you the diagram, that the picture that show what is the component of the so-called ASEAN framework on digital data governance. There are really 4 big components in the data governance framework. The first one is the data life cycle and ecosystem, with a view to provide a data governance through the data life cycle, educate the protection of different types of data. And one of the key initiatives is the ASEAN data classification framework. The second component is the cross-border data flow, which a key initiative is that the ASEAN cross-border data flow mechanism. And we will discuss on this matter a little bit further. The third component is digitalization and emerging technology. And the key initiative within the component is ASEAN Digital Innovation Forum. And finally, but to me, that is for the long term, but very, very important, which is the legal, regulatory, and policy component, with the initiative that is the ASEAN Data Protection and Privacy Forum. I don't want to go a bit further on this, because I also heard that Hong Xin already explained to the audience. So I go straight to the key point here. For the progress of the initiative. For the ASEAN Data Protection and Privacy Forum, that ADPPF will take place annually, back to the second Telsom ATRC leader retreat, and the inaugural forum was held on the 16th August last year in Bangkok, Thailand. And the forum will be held annually, that provide really significant input to operationalize the so-called ASEAN data flow mechanism. The ASEAN cross-border data flow mechanism, there is a concrete proposal for that, which is due on track, comprising of ASEAN certification and ASEAN model contractual clause that was endorsed by the TELMIN last year. For the ASEAN data classification framework, the working group on the digital data governance is ongoing, with the view to come up with some guideline, with some direction that help ASEAN member country to do better in classify the data based on the risk, based on its type of data, so that it can facilitate the application of relevant regulation on that. And finally, the ASEAN Digital Innovation Forum, and Vietnam has hosted the initial forum, the first forum on 12 August last year, and the forum will also be held annually. But as you know, that all of the activities is now being delayed a bit due to the COVID-19. But I'm sure that by having such kind of setting like video conference, then we can somehow overcome the obstacle. Now, I want to focus on the ASEAN cross-border flows mechanism that I have already mentioned. That will be a dual track comprising of ASEAN certification and ASEAN model contractual clause. That is exactly aligned with the global data protection principle and international framework of best practices like the OECD guideline on the protection and privacy and border flow of personal data, the APEC privacy framework, the EU, and it consistent with the DDG principle, that data integrity, trustworthy, the data use, data security, capacity building, harmonization of personal data, protection, regulation, accountability, and adoption of best practices. The participation of dual track supposed to be on voluntary basis. So it can be on bilateral, it can be on a trilateral, or maybe one or two or more ASEAN member country. So just the ASEAN certification is a mechanism to allow the certified organization that has demonstrated a good data protection policy and practices. The mechanism will specify a lot of operational aspects like the National Data Protection Authority certification body, the program requirement, and certify business, so on and so forth. And it also that the ASEAN model contractual clause to be included in the agreement between organization, and the mechanism is to be endorsed by ADG Min by this year. So actually that next year we assume that there will be some realization of the mechanism within some of ASEAN member countries. So now my last slide is about the recommendation. To prepare for the introduction of ASEAN cross-border data flow mechanism to be introduced next year. I'm sure that many of you already adopted, but I think that it would be strongly recommend to every company and organization to continue adopting the standard for privacy requirement, which consistent with APEC, OECD, and ASEAN data protection framework. You need to improve your procedure and information system in line with the national law, and prepare to demonstrate the data privacy management requirement at the request of the Privacy Enforcement Authority. And finally, that you need to enhance the legal counsel who can look after the person data protection, and improve the system to protect the data transmitted overseas. So we just to summarize that we have ASEAN has already come into the crucial moment where we want to realize a part of the so-called free flow of data within the region. But of course that we also have to face the fact that in each and every ASEAN member country, we have a very different national law and regulation. That is why we have to adopt a very vigilant approach, making sure that the thing can go smoothly and gradually, and hopefully that with this kind of endeavors, ASEAN can come together in a more harmonized and more convergent manner. So thank you very much for the opportunity. I really want to listen to further discussion on the matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lam. Thank you so much. I wasn't expecting so much of good information. I thought it was just a few pointers, but it is definitely very, very, very helpful for this particular session for us to warm. I mean, in fact, you have warmed up the session to give us a perspective of how ASEAN Secretariat is working with all the ASEAN member states in terms of this whole digital data governance. And this is a topic that is close to heart of many who are working in this whole digital transformation space. And to begin with, allow me to also bring on the rest of the plenary speakers before we jump on to get into the conversation. Maybe I can start with the lady, Ida Yuvenko from Philippines. You can introduce yourself, you know, a 3-minute introduction, then we can go on to Dr. Sa and Steve. So Ida, maybe you'd like to unmute your microphone.
Good morning, everyone. I am Ida Yubienko from the Department of ICT of the Philippines. I am currently the Director for MIS, or Management Information Systems Service, and our group handles IS architecture development and implementation, ICT infrastructure management, including office productivity programs, as well as internal capability, ICT capability building. As part of the IS implementation strategy, we recognize that a key success factor is a robust data governance strategy. This is to ensure data quality, usability, availability, and integrity. As part also of the DICT mandate, we will be defining the IS architecture as well as the data governance for critical government sectors. The need for this has been especially evident in this time of the COVID-19 pandemic because different government agencies need to share data and collaborate. And without this data governance framework, this will be very hard to do. So even if we don't have that now, we want to start doing that now, or establishing the data governance framework for the different sectors of the government. Thank you, and thank you for inviting me here, ACIO organizers.
Thank you, Ida, and may I invite Dr. Sa to give a 3-minute introduction of yourself and on the work that you do with data governance.
Okay, thank you, Hong Sin. Okay, good morning, everybody. My name is Sakse Kuntot. Okay, I used to be the director of Digital Government Agency of Thailand for 8 years, and right now I am an advisor for the Electronic Transaction Development Agency, or EDA. Okay, as a digital government digital transformation advisor. Okay, so my thought about data governance is that during my time at the DGA, okay, we managed to convince the government of Thailand to come out with a Digital Government Act, which is exactly 1 year, last year. Okay, today is the exactly 1 year for that law to be effective. Okay, in that digital government law, the whole idea is about data. We even have one article in that law specifying about data governance principle for government agency in Thailand to follow. And last month, the government published data governance framework in the government gazette. So for Thailand, it's very clear that we're gonna develop our digital government based on our digital governance frameworks. Okay, under the concept of open and connected government. So now you can see that it's really important that data governance is the key in, linking government agency together. And I heard some of you talking about COVID-19, and I think it's very clear that COVID-19 has shown us that the importance of data governance, because each day we are informed by a number of, many government agencies around the world. The data, the information, we expect this data or information to be governed first, because we have to trust the government. Now, without data governance, okay, it's going to be very difficult to, fight against COVID-19. So I would say that if you want to do the digital transformation, you have to make sure you have data governance in place first. Thank you.
Great introduction, Dr. Sak. Steve, would you like to come online to introduce yourself, because you have a good experience?
I would, yes. Thank you, Hong Sin. Good morning, everyone. So I'm the Director of Consulting at FPT Information System Corporation. FPT Information Systems is a subsidiary of FPT Corporation, which is the largest tech group, a tech company in Vietnam and operates globally. We have a software division that focuses on software products and outsourcing services. There's a telecoms division that focuses on internet and telecoms, a data center, cloud services. There's also various media and retail subsidiaries. It's a big group. And FPT Information Systems is the solutions and system integration division of FPT Corporation. Before joining FPT, I spent most of my career in management and strategy and technology consulting, primarily with Booz Allen Hamilton, which later became Booz & Company, and then was bought by PwC and became a strategy and. So that's some of the time I spent in Thailand. I was working for Booz Allen and working with the government of Thailand there. So I joined FPT 4 years ago to focus primarily on digital government and smart city solutions. But my role has evolved into a bit of a broader consulting leadership role, still based in FPT Information System, but working across the subsidiaries and the headquarters. And just last year, we established a new division, a new unit called FPT Digital, where the entire focus of the unit is digital transformation consulting, primarily for commercial clients in Vietnam. So on the topic at hand today, digital data governance, of course, everything we've heard from Mr. Lam up to now is all important, privacy and cross-border flows. So we talk about that a lot. But in my work, what I see the most is I come at it from a perspective of assisting clients in digital transformation journeys. So for companies, that means extending digital technologies and digital capabilities across customer experience, across operations, into new digital business models. For governments, that means applying digital technologies to better deliver public services and operations and decision-making across digital channels. So but in both of these situations, a lot of what we focus on is converting business processes from vertical to horizontal. And in the past, in the analog world, all processes occurred sort of vertically within organization boundaries, within a particular department or particular agency. Well, when we go digital and we're trying to do end-to-end digital processes across those channels, we have to change that to a horizontal process to look at it across agencies. So this is where the data governance comes in. It's all about sharing the data and providing access to data, or at least exposing a given agency or a given department's data to all the other departments and agencies that are involved in a horizontal business process. So, of course, all these topics are things we work with and see and address regularly, but for me, on a daily basis and sort of a constant basis, it's this whole idea of sharing data between agencies and even between departments within agencies or business units within corporations. So it's not unique to government. It happens in big corporations too. You can't get anybody to share data across. So a big part of the governance aspect is rules around access and rules around sharing. So that's just as an opening statement. But again, yeah, thank you for having us and for organizing the event.
Okay, thank you, Steve. To our audience who is attending this session, whether if you're on Zoom or on YouTube or even on FB Live, our session today, we have Mr. Lan, who really shared, who shared about the overall ASEAN expectation and ASEAN work. Though, it's like he mentioned a lot about, like the digital trade, the infrastructure innovation, the big subject on data governance, digital inclusion, cybersecurity. Overall, there is a huge aspect of data that crosses up, the whole 5 pillars. Most important that he also emphasized in terms of like the cross-border flow, data flow. We all have a lot of work to explore and to build the confidence across ASEAN. And in plenary, we have like either who have good experience in the Philippines, government sector, and of course Steve, who has a good real of experience in terms of working with different government agencies and enterprises. Dr. Saku, he himself has done a lot of work when he was running his function in DGA, Digital Government Agency. I would like to, start the conversation from the angle of whether I am a government agency or I am a large corporate. Where should I begin if I think of starting data governance? What would be the very first thing that I got to do in order to get into the conversation? As much as Mr. Lan has already mentioned about the upcoming ASEAN certification, the emphasis on PDPA, but as someone who has not started data governance and is thinking about starting data governance, what would be the very first thing that you would suggest or you would recommend to them? If I may start with Dr. Sak.
Okay, thank you, Hong Sin. I normally would, as an ex-CEO, you have a question of why do you need to do data governance? You have to ask yourself first. Okay. So basically, okay, I'll give you an example for Thailand. We were about to be compliant with the PDPA, the privacy law. So before the deadline, which is now, I think, has been postponed to next year, everybody has to comply with the law. So at least you do data governance because you have to comply with the law, depending on your status of your organization. So in order to comply with the law, especially for the privacy, it means that you have to make sure you have some sort of data governance mechanism in your organization or your agency to follow the law. Okay, but I wouldn't say that compliance is one thing. There are another reasons to do data governance too. For example, accountability. Imagine if you are a government agency and you have to publish information or data. Right now, we are in the middle of fighting the COVID-19. Imagine if you are in the Ministry of Public Health, okay, and you have to inform the people about certain data to the public. For example, in Thailand, okay, every day, the Ministry of Health would, inform the public what is the number of people who, get infected by the virus. Yesterday it was 3, something like that. So you have to be able to have a good process in coming up with that data. You have to have a people who are responsible for making sure that that number is correct, is explainable, because the number you're going to give to the public will hold you accountable. So the second reason for doing data governance is accountability. Okay, and Steve just mentioned about doing data governance in the corporate because they need to share data, among themselves. The third reason for doing governance, data governance, is internal efficiency. In the digital era, everybody, I think, is sure that we need to exchange data between people in the organization. So the third reason might be useful for most of the organization to do data governance. The fourth one, I think, is quite probably the last reason to do it, is the innovation. Here I'm talking about open data. I'm talking about sharing data with your customers, with your partners. So I would conclude my talk about why we need to do data governance. You have to ask yourself first why you need data governance. So in summary, data governance is a strategy for your agency. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sar. I will come back to you, again, all right, because you share a lot about the why. And, maybe for Ida, I'd like to invite you for this conversation of where do you, where to start on data governance and why?
I think to start with data governance, what is important really is to identify first the different data sets in the organization. And by identifying these data sets, we have also to define or identify which organizations or which units in the organization should be responsible for this data. Meaning we have to establish the single source of truth for each of the data sets and define accountabilities for each for this single source of truths. We have to also define data sharing policies, and specifically in the IS architecture, we have to define what data would have to be shared among the different information systems in the agency. So if we go out, as Steve said earlier, we also have to define horizontal sharing or processing of data, because an agency, especially for instance, in a specific sector like health sector, one agency does not own all the data needed to manage that specific sector on a government-wide basis. So we have to define which of the different agencies would be holding the single sources of truth for the different data sets that would be needed. And having done that, we have to define also which data should be made accessible to all, and in this case, define also the security policies for each data. So I would think that the first thing to really to start in defining the governance framework is define the data sets and the single sources of truth for these data sets. And from there, everything will follow, like accountability, data sharing policies, and security policies for the different data sets.
Steve, what would be Steve, hi. What would be your opinion in terms of like where to begin if, let's say, I'm a person that that I want to start data governance. Where do I start from? Do I go straight to my boss and say, "Boss, I want to do data governance," but the boss say, "How do you start?
Right.
Where do you start?" Right? Yeah. So in your experience, in your years of experience, when a client comes to you and said, I want to start data governance, where do I begin?
Yeah.
I think there should, okay, sorry.
That's okay. What I mean, Ida raised some of the things you do and some of the starting points in that process. I was thinking when you said that in your survey, people, not a lot of people who answered the survey seem to know what is meant by data governance or what data governance is. And I think that's less a question of not knowing what it is, but terminology. Because in every organization and in every company, there are rules and there are security structures. There are a lot of different policies and procedures with respect to managing data. But people don't kind of recognize it as a data governance, the way you call it data governance. So, it's a matter, for me, it's a matter of, and as a consultant, we often say the same things, but it's a matter of doing an assessment of what is your data governance maturity in your organization at a given point in time. So if someone were to say to me, if I was the CIO or I was CEO of an organization and the people involved with data or IT came to me and said, we want to establish a data governance framework and a data governance policy, then I would say, sure. I would start with an assessment of a collection of all the policies and procedures that are out there already regarding data quality or data security, and start to just bring it together under a single umbrella of data governance. And then, as Ida says, put together the organization. You have to have an effect, which I think is probably a long topic we can talk about a lot, is organizing to do data governance within the organization. But for me, it's an assessment where we are now, what's our target state, what is it we want to develop, what do we want our data governance to look like, and then understanding the gaps and then making a plan to fill the gaps. That's kind of how I would start off in an organization.
Okay, I think this is hit right to the point. Ida, you wanted to say something earlier?
No, it's okay.
Okay, all right. So moving on, I think, Dr. Shah have touched a lot about, the why of this whole governance. And Ida, you shared a lot about the experiences. And of course, Steve, you come on to talk very specifically about, yes, in fact, when an organization wanted to start on data governance, first and foremost, how much does the people actually understand the terminology, the policies, and of course, being able to do all this, you can then be able to fill the gap. And then you can start doing the work and bringing the people. What about decision making? In all, even for Mr. Lan, like in decision making, I mean, of course, Mr. Lan is like a very big umbrella that has to work with all the different member states to establish the whole cross-border data flow. Then, while each and every one of you, who works in your, in your own organization, where, what about when coming to decision making, when you talk about like accountability, sharing, defining policies, who actually makes the decision in your organization? So maybe Mr. Lana, I could start on you because I think, you know, I would like to hear your opinion as you are also one of the key participants.
Thank you very much. Actually, that I really appreciate the comment from speakers. Really, from the perspective of the company organization, and I truly want to bring it a bit further from the perspective of the policymaker. The data governance, actually that is being developed with a view to promote the innovation. You know, the data today is really considered a lifeblood of the cyber system. So, and it is truly we consider that those who have a good data governance is truly a valuable organization. You create your value by promoting the way you process, the way you collect, and the way you publish the data. So that is basically very much associated with the value of the organization. It is not only the value of the organization, but also the power of the organization. And look into from the perspective of the government of the nation, that is really the value of the nation. And you look from that perspective, you know that the government truly want to build a nation, an economy which is reliable to the partners, and also we need to also consider that the data today is not like 10 years ago. It is the power. It is the power of each and every organization, and it's also the power of the country. So in order to have the power, you need to have a good material. You have to have a good machinery, and that is all about the data governance. You want to be a trustful partnership, you want to create the innovation, you need to have a good quality data baseline. So that is why I think it's truly crucial to for the organization to observe the data governance regulation. And I think it will become more and more important in the year to come. Currently, ASEAN is starting to explore the possibility of harmonizing the regulation. We want to inspire for those who already advanced, have advanced system in the data governance, can inspire those who have a less advanced. So that is what ASEAN has been doing, and I think that is truly a correct response to the need of having a good data governance. So I hope that I can give you how determine, you know, the notion of how determination that each and every ASEAN member country have to promote the data governance. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lam. I love what you said about, you know, promoting innovation, and of course, data is power. And so I think when you say data is power, that people also say, okay, where do I get the power, and who's gonna make the decision, right? So Dr. Sak, you know, please share, you know, in your years of experience, of course, as you who used to be the #1 man in the agency, how do you have, I mean, like how do you handle this when it comes to date? I mean, like having to make decisions. You know, of course, you see report up the line, right? So
right. As I mentioned, is in the why. Okay, one of the reason is the internal efficiency. As a CEO, okay, you are supposed to make decision based on data. Okay, so of course, any CEO would want to make decision based on the right data. How can we come up with the right data? Okay, so everybody is saying data is the new oil, but for me, the right data is the new goal. So with data governance, you will eventually get the right data. So in order to get the right data, you have to have some sort of framework or mechanism to, you know, to get the right data. By right data, I mean the quality of data, okay? Not just, you know, the correct data, but also the data that, you know, that would, how to say, make the data user understand, okay? So in order to do that, when you do data governance, it's very important. You have to start with data stakeholders. So basically you need to let the data users to tell the data creator what kind of data they would need to use for something like make a decision or something else, okay? So you have to create ecosystem for data governance in your agency. Okay.
And either, you know, what is your view in terms of like who makes the decision in terms of data governance and who is actually accountable? I mean, I hear you talk a lot about, you know, accountability, you know, so who exactly holds that accountability?
First, I believe that a data governance committee should be put up. Of course, a part of that committee would be the Management Information Systems Group, and also maybe the policy group of the organization. And then, of course, we have to, as I said earlier, we have to identify the data set and who will be the owners of these data sets. So the owners of these data sets would be primarily accountable for the creation, the maintenance of these different data, and of course the policies, creating the policies on how this data will be shared with the others. The MIS will now be there to support in terms of information systems that need to be created, and in terms of the security, establishing or providing the necessary security tools, the necessary tools to secure all of this data.
Okay, all right. Steve, I think coming to you, I believe you have all kinds of experience when you start working with corporates or government agencies where they have nobody yet. I mean, to begin with, they have every other position, but they don't have somebody that's called data steward or chief data officer or data and analytic engineer. So where would you begin as in a new organization? So how do you work in this scenario?
Yeah, I mean, all the comments so far have been spot on. I think a lot of agencies you'll have the IT people, you know, and so there's database administrators, and there's, you know, the systems people who are supporting specific applications, and then there's the users, and then there's the departments that they're working with. So there's constant conflict between them, who should be doing what. So what Ida was suggesting, I think, is the right approach. A lot of organizations have what they call a data governance board, and on the board you have representation from the owners, the creators of the data, or the aggregators of the data, the users of the data, the technology people who are managing the operations. So you have representation from all the various stakeholders in the process on this board, and then they report up to leadership in the organization. So ultimate accountability and decision making rests with, you know, the top of the organization, but they delegate that down to a board, and then the operations leader of the data, you know, data operations. So I think that's the best way to do it, is make sure everybody's everybody's needs and everybody's situations are being taken into account when you're setting up your data governance structure.
Okay, very
It's a
interesting.
little easier said than done, but that's what we would recommend.
I think it leads on to the very important question of like, while we are all clear about like the data owner actually has a major part to play. And also like what Dr. Saab says is like, you know, as the #1 man of the organization, you want to be able to make the right decision, having the right kind of data set or the data information, the quality matters. So moving forward is that, you know, while we talk about we found the people who are accountable for data governance, the very next important thing is that, you know, what kind of guidelines and what kind of standards? While Mr. Lan talks about, you know, OECD and ASEAN are following very, very closely. So how does the rate of view in Philippines and Vietnam and Thailand and of course other regions as well, you know, what do y'all worked on? And also, you know, when you said you want to follow a certain standard, how, you know, is there any involvement of needing budget? And how do you handle that? So there's two aspects, right? Guidelines. And after the guideline is, do you need to go out and warrant for money to do the work? So how do you go about doing that? By the way, these are some of the questions that comes from you know, the audience, because before I run a live chat, I usually do a poll to get feedback, what the experience was, their opinion. So that's why some of these questions coming up are very, very hit to the heart, as in it gets to the pain point. So Ida, you who operates in the government sector, what is your experience and opinion? Ida, your speaker.
Okay. So in terms of the policies and guidelines, I think, as I said earlier, who will approve and issue this guideline. But the guidelines should come from, it should be a collaborative discussion among who the owner is of the data, the policy making, and of course the MIS for security, and how it will be included in the different systems of the organization. So I think the committee should be the one to issue the policies and the guidelines. In terms, what is the other question again?
Yes, the other question actually is like, you know, so you find your guidelines, you have your people. The next thing is, do you need to ask for budget to start data governance?
Yes, definitely, because some of the technologies that will be used to implement data governance will have to be acquired. So as well as there may be additional persons who will be assigned full-time to the maintenance of this data. So a budget will be required for data governance to be fully implemented.
Okay, so which means to say, you know,
as I said, the policies and guidelines.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. So it means to say asking for budget is not a problem because all the bosses understand data governance, right?
So I did not come again.
I was mentioning that, you know, so when all the bosses actually understand data governance, they are ready for the budget, or you need to educate them about the budget.
I think in our organization, there's already it is recognized that a budget would be needed. So we in MIS would have to be forward-looking on what budget to propose, what types of, we have to be on top of what will be needed to implement data governance. But we are always in coordination, or in we are in close discussion with different units of the organization to know their requirements.
Interesting. Thank you. And Dr. Saab, I'd like to hear from you, because you are like used to be the #1 man of a very important agency.
Well, as I mentioned, you know, any CEO would want to make decision, you know, based on the right data. So if you want to sell the idea of implementing data governance project in your agency, you have to tell your CEO that, okay, once we finish our project, the CEO would, you know, would get the right data, would make decision better. And in terms of, you know, convincing middle management, you have to tell them, you know, that, okay, we're gonna make sure that, you know, once we finish the data governance project in our organization, you would work better, you would have the right data to make decision, you would be able to do better report, you would be comfortable when you get the data from other departments to do your work, because it's, you know, somebody, how to say, make sure that the data you get from them is the right one, is the okay one. So I think in order to convince everybody in the agency that why we need to do data governance, you say, because it's a win-win for everybody, because you cannot work without data. That's my 2 cents to sell the idea of the project to your management.
So it's good, it's easy to get money from money approval from you, right? Because you're so understanding.
Right.
Okay.
But Hong Sin,
Yes.
Mr. Lan mentioned about innovation.
Yes.
So innovation means that you're going to open up a new kind of business for your agency by utilizing data. So this would in line with the digital transformation, because digital transformation is about come up with a new idea of doing business. If you want to do that, you can't if you don't have the right data. If you don't have the data that would, you know, open up your line of business. So as I said in my first session, you can't do digital transformation without data governance. It's a must. I would say it's a must.
But Dr. Sal, does, you know, like, do you follow a guideline or a standard when you start working on this whole data governance, like what Mr. Lan mentioned about OECD? But do you, like, does Thailand also follow that guideline?
When I, you know, in my first section, for Thailand, we already have data governance framework from the government. It was published in the government gazette last month. Okay, so in that framework, okay, any agency can adopt it, but it doesn't mean you have to copy everything in that, you know, framework. You have to make sure that how to tailor the framework to your, you know, organization, business, and structure, and so on. But the key thing is still there. For example, we are talking about data governance council or data government board. So we still have to have that kind of thing. You have to have a team of data people. For example, you have to have some sort of data steward in your agency, and then probably you have to have some sort of data audit team to make sure that, you know, you get the right data and the quality and so on. Okay, so my recommendation would be data governance is not IT-led project. IT is a supporter. If your agency start data governance with the IT team, I think you go in the wrong direction. You're gonna fail definitely if you let the IT people to do the project.
So the business team is
Yes,
right.
the business team, the strategic team, or the I don't know, the innovation team or some sort.
What about operation? How, are they important in terms of like operation as well? Like
the IT would be the main supporter, but
okay,
not the leader of the project, of the data governance project.
okay, it's very clear. IT, this is the first time you get to support. So, okay, and Steve, because you run the function of the consultant, you have many clients, and when it comes to guidelines, like you have a certain sense of guidelines, or you follow the industry guidelines, and then how do you work with your client in terms of like budgeting? They said, Steve, we never cater for budget.
Well,
Can you do free?
well, I haven't often seen sort of separate budget requests or separate budget focus on data governance itself. On data as a concept, which is now such a big part of what we think of when we think of corporate or government assets. So, the assets data is a huge part of it now. And as we say, you don't do digital transformation without an intense focus on data. So especially now with big data, open data, there's so many different kinds of data that we didn't deal with in the past. So there's definitely a new emphasis on the need to manage data and deal with data. So there's a cost to that, of course. You have to, there's a technology cost to it, there's a platform cost, there's a human resource cost. You have to have data scientists, you have to have data analysts, you have to have data stewards involved. So usually the budgeting is wrapped up in sort of an overall request for money to do technology and to do digital work in your organization. So somewhere buried in there, you could separate out the cost for actually setting up the governance and running the governance. But I haven't yet seen where sort of money's being requested just for that. Maybe it's a one project where you need to, use people to do a project or engage consultants to do a project or something, then you need to ask for budget. But otherwise, it's pretty much folded into the whole data management concept. But yeah, Mr. Lan mentioned the, GDPR, the OECD, so usually there's a lot of standards around security and privacy, those two things. They don't pay much attention to internal sort of intrinsic quality of the data and use of the data in your company and whatnot, but security and privacy are the big ones. So you point to those international and global standards for that. For the rest, you just go with best practice. Again, I don't want to overdo the consulting thing, but we always say, okay, who's doing it well, where in the world, and study that and sort of combine that and take the best from that and apply it in a given circumstance. So it's a combination of global standards for security and privacy, and then best practices for other parts of it that we try to pull together to make recommendations to an organization or a company.
I think it's a very interesting exchange because in line to what ASEAN CIO is doing this year, we actually have Dr. Sak to actually lead the digital transformation unit, in which we are getting a lot of queries where the ASEAN CIOs in exchange of information. So at the same time, there are already requests that seek for our support in terms of giving advice in terms of like even starting from PDPA and Dr. Sauk's direction is very much about like data governance. But is there, based on each your experience, hearing from what Mr. Land has shared about this whole cross-border data flow and from all the speakers, do you think is there like a right time or a best time in terms of deployment of data governance? So, I would like to, back on to you, Steve, it's like, based on your years of experience, like at what stage the clients, or like what you mentioned, even for the budget, it is kind of like varied and kind of like put into specifically like in the aspect of data management is, how does this whole thing look like in terms of like, when is the right time that you say, okay, Mr. Customers, it's time that you need to do data governance. You need to have the framework. Is there a right time or a best time, or, at what point? Yeah.
If you ask me, my personal view, the right time is yesterday.
You are right, Stephen.
Okay.
It's never too soon to start doing something around data governance. And as I mentioned earlier, most organizations already have elements of policies and procedures in place. So it's not that they're not doing anything, but it's never too soon to start pulling that together and making it more structured and more visible and more sort of take better control of your data assets and manage them in a better way, and do that with an overall umbrella. So, but that's being a little bit facetious, but the organizations that are moving into open data, a lot of them are building, certainly governments are setting up open data platforms and opening up their data by law in some cases, and just by practice in others. You must have a governance structure in place before you start to open your data and allow access to a variety of users and whatnot. And then organizations that are beginning to collect information and from private sources, the whole data privacy and protection of personal data is huge. So, by all means, if you don't have an effective governance structure in place when you start doing that, number one, you won't get anybody's data. They just won't give it to you if they don't trust you with it. And number two, you have to make sure it's protected, because then you're liable to a number of, you expose yourself to legal issues if for some reason you get a breach and you don't, manage data in the way that you represented to people that you were going to when you asked them for their data. So yeah, anyway, you can't do it soon enough, in my view.
But Hong-Sin, I like to add to what Stephen just said, and Mr. Land too. The data governance framework for ASEAN. I think we are not only talking about exchange data according to the law and so on, but I think we have to consider that some of the personal data are very, very valuable. How can we come up or balance between protection and innovation? That's the key. Because if you follow strictly to the law, we won't get anything. We won't get value from our personal data at all. But if you don't, if we won't do it, okay, it's going to be a problem. Data protection and so on. So I think I would like to say this to Mr. Land. If we can come up with a balance between, innovation and protection for our personal data, I think that is the way to go. We don't want to be like the Chinese, where completely no privacy at all. But we also don't want to be like the EU, with the GDPR, very strict rules of using personal data. But can ASEAN come up with a way in the middle, where we get privacy and innovation at the same time. That is our way to go. I think, of course, it will be very challenging, but I'm sure that if we, have some sort of a good framework, I think we can, achieve that. That's my view. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. You just opened the, Mr. Lam, you have something to share?
I want to follow Dr. Sak intervention. I think that is a truly inspiring idea for ASEAN. Try to strike the balance between protection and innovation is always the key question for ASEAN. We have a lot of data, a lot type of data, and some of data it really need to be open for need open to access to the public, and some of the information it truly, especially the private one, it truly sensitive to so for ASEAN, in order to facilitate that, we of course that we need to a lot of lessons to be learned, a lot of best practices to be employed, but we are now focused on the so-called the data classification framework, and that is why I think all the work should I think that is how the solutions should start from. We need to have a good classification, and unfortunately that not every ASEAN member country have the regulation on that, and that is why in ASEAN at the government level the thing is still on the target is still moving, and ASEAN is now working on that. But I truly believe that from the perspective of business people, I think it's never soon to start the operationalize the data governance. I truly believe, I truly endorse the idea that Steve has already mentioned. The organization should continuously review and update the security, the quality of the data, and also this is really to bring up your trust, bring up the value for the organization, and then try to associate yourself as much as possible to the national law. And if it's not the national law, if it's not available, that you need to do it based on your client's standard. So I think that is no sooner or later. I think sooner better than later. We need to do it at the private level, but at the government level, we are working on that. Thank you.
Okay. In fact, we have very interesting audience and in this whole attendees group, and hearing from all of you. And Ida, do you have anything that you'd like to add to the question about like when is the right time? I mean, other than your agency, you have several other ministries. Are they also like adopting data governance very faithfully, like the PICT?
I think it is really very important, and as PICT in these areas. So they're really looking up to the agency to provide them guidelines on data governance. Hello,
okay.
yeah.
Very interesting because
do you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, but
so
I would like to bring on some of the guests who are actually in this group, in the participant list. I see that in the chat session we have Ashok from NUS ISIS. Ashok, are you still there? Can I have your video, or can I bring you online? Can
yes.
You?
Good morning, everybody. I'm online.
Okay, live chat team, can you feature Ashok? Is your video on?
Yep, my video is on.
You are at comfort seat. Okay, Ashok is actually from NUS ISIS, and we are working on a collaboration with them. So he was writing to me and saying that he enjoyed the session and he would like to share his view on data governance. So I hope the screen is yours.
Yeah. First of all, I would like to thank President Chai and Hang Sen for inviting me to the session. We met in Myanmar before the lockdown was just beginning to be implemented. So we're very fortunate to have met up in Myanmar. And it's a great privilege to be a part of this group. I've been listening to the session and extremely inspiring and extremely pragmatic. So thank you very much for that. So I thought in that, continuing with all of those comments, it occurred to me that based on my experience, I've been in Singapore now 32 years now. And I remember, and all of you I'm sure also would remember, how we used to struggle changing the definition of cybersecurity. Those days we used to call it security, from an IT function to a boardroom conversation. 20 years ago, we were trying all kinds of methods. And one of the methods which we thought, out of frustration, we said, let's do this in terms of, we are not able to convince the bosses. So let's try and scare the hell out of them. So we used to come out with scenarios of security breaches and so on and so forth. And slowly over the period of time, security has become a boardroom conversation, not an IT function anymore. So likewise, data and data governance, and as one of you mentioned, I think Mr. Sak mentioned, it is not an IT function. To me, it is more of an organizational culture alongside its values. So you need to get data to that point, and data governance and treatment, because every stakeholder, every member of the organization is dealing with data. And therefore its quality, its integrity depends on an individual. And I think Stephen mentioned about asset, data being asset. For me, data, in fact, I had a few seminars which I ran last year saying that data is the most precious asset of this century. It's no longer oil. To me, it is oxygen. You cannot survive without it. And if it's contaminated, not only you die, people around you also die. So data is the greatest asset. And in terms of implementation, like I said, it's a culture. It will not have a finish line, right? It's a continuous process. And one of the experiences from Singapore, I found that, again, like one of you said, GDPR is one extreme, right? To me, on paper and for lawyers, it's a great document. But how easy is it to implement? The litmus test of some of the frameworks and policies, also the last mile implementation. And that's something that we need to always constantly remind ourselves that whatever policies and other things that we come up with has to be understood by the security guard who's at the condo taking down details, right? In fact, I remember this was 18 months ago. He wanted me to write my phone number, all of those details. I refused to give it to him. And then there was a bit of an altercation there. But the next time I went there, he didn't ask for it. So in terms of implementation, it needs to reach that that last mile. So that is something you may want to think about. And the last point I wanted to make was, with the new technologies, this problem is going to get much more complex. With 5G now able to take and generate more data at source, blessing in one sense, in terms of its authenticity and origin, you can be a little more assured. You don't need to transcribe it. At the same time, it also exposes the governance aspect. So you need to come up with more around that. But having said that, there are other technologies like artificial intelligence, which will help you to triangulate the data, therefore make it a little more cleaner. At the same time, analytics, which will help you to make good use of data. So while these technologies are coming up, this set of governance, as Stephen said, should have been started a long time ago. Better late than never, but it's important for us to collectively move ahead, because again, data will not have boundaries. It needs to cross over organizations and political boundaries. And therefore, we depend on each other on the quality of data, which is then assured by the governance framework. Right? So I just thought I will share some of these thoughts and stop here. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Appreciate it. Over to you, Hang Seng.
Yeah, thank you for jumping in, Ashok. It's really much appreciated, because it's always good to hear from the Singapore perspective. And we have also, a question that came into me that really asks about, like, what is involved in data governance? I'm not sure if this question is referring to technology or process or people. So maybe I could put it to, my plenary speakers, like, what is involved in data governance from the aspect of people, process, and technology. So, maybe Dr. Sa, I just need you to kickstart, since you are being voted as one of the 100 in the world, top one of the 100 digital transformation leader, right? So can you talk a little bit about DG as in data governance in the aspect of people, process, and technology?
Okay. Well, we're gonna need all of that, Hong Sen, for sure.
Yeah.
The people need to understand the importance of data governance first, especially people in the top management. Okay, if you can convince them, I think it's not too difficult. Okay, I think everybody sees that how important is the data. They're gonna come up with policy, or I don't know, the budget. I think they're gonna support you for that, for sure. But budget alone doesn't mean it doesn't guarantee your success. When you do the assessments, like Stephen said, you can have a gap. It means that you have to probably change the way you do things regarding your data. It means that you're gonna change certain things for your process. Okay, I think technology would be the last thing, I think, but it is important too. Okay, so we're gonna need all of this, but I think the most important thing would be the people first, to understand it, because they're gonna need to change the way they do things with data. That's for sure.
Okay, Steve, can I jump to you first before I get to Ida?
Yeah, sure. I would just echo what Sak has mentioned. The people and process, data governance is we've been saying over and over, it's not a technology issue. It's not an IT issue. It's a boardroom issue. It's a corporate issue, a corporate asset issue. So people and processes are going to be where you're focusing. Technology is the tool, technology is where it sits. And of course, you have to bring into the equation the fact that, as we mentioned, AI, machine learning, there's so many new things we can do with data and so many new ways we can manipulate and aggregate and analyze data that it's critical, but it starts with the people and the processes. The old adage was that the weakest link in your security operation is people. It's not the technologies and the platforms, it's the people. It's kind of the same thing. If you don't have people following the rules and complying with data governance structures and processes, then it's not going to work. So, yeah, I mean, all three of those are important elements of data governance. The first two being, I think, the most.
Okay.
Hong Sin, I like to add what
Yes.
Stephen said a little bit.
Yes.
When we're talking about people following the new process, if you see what I mean, I think we don't think doing data governance is just compliance or accountability, as I mentioned in my first session. But I think we have to understand that if your data is governance, okay, you're going to see a lot of potentials in making innovation out of your data. So it means that you have to know how to make use of your data in a new way. Because before, you never think that you would have this kind of data before. But once you do the data governance, you get new sets of data. You're going to need new skill of doing things with the data. So it's not just, follow the rules and make things governance, but also make them innovative too. Make things innovative too. That's my opinion.
Okay. Okay. Ida, anything to add from your side?
Yes, definitely. There should be a right combination of people skills, internal processes, as well as the use of the appropriate technology. The people would be, of course, first and foremost, as I was saying earlier, the data governance board or committee that should be present in an organization, as well as this committee or the board will have to be in charge, or the responsibility would be for them to decide on what policies and guidelines should be used regarding data governance in terms of creation, in terms of who should be able to access, in terms of data sharing policies and guidelines, and who should be the owners of this data. So the people also would be the actual owners of the data, maintaining the data and ensuring that the data there is integrity in the data that are being shared. And the security and the technology, of course, will involve security first and foremost. The tools that will be used, like for instance, data analytics tools and the database framework itself. So this would be all of a combination of people skills, processes, and appropriate technology.
Okay. Mr. Lam, is there anything to add from your side about the subject on people, process, technology?
I think that I don't have much thing to add, but I think the digital data governance is truly a very comprehensive process. It involves the people or corporate procedure, and also technology. It's a part of it. It's a part of the equation. So, but I always very much want to recommend that from the perspective of the governments, we focus much on compliance, and I think that the compliance is not just about how the business will need to to comply with the regulation. But actually, that we want to inspire the business to have the culture of manage your data, making sure that the data is in good quality, in good shape, and it's in high security. And that's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very, very, very much. And in fact, we are like very on time in terms of, how we run the whole entire session. And there is one question that that is actually quite a burning question that came in that talks about, we'll take on this one last question before we wrap up. Do data governance delay or speed up? Particularly, their concern is about transparency. My take is like speed and transparency, data governance. It should be all good and great, because I keep hearing about data integrity, data assurance, data quality. But let me put this question to all my plenary for the last round of addressing some of the questions is, in your opinion, do data governance delay or speed up, particularly offering level of transparency? How do we measure the level of transparency? Steve, I'd like to start with you because you work with a lot of people.
Well, you could say, depending on, again, your data governance operation, your data governance processes should be such that they don't necessarily interfere or represent an obstacle to getting data up onto open data platforms or exposed to the people that need to see it or that want to use it. So, it could, there are some steps to go through in processing and organizing and clearing and confirming and approving, et cetera, et cetera. So conceivably it could represent a bit of a delay, but not if you're doing it right. And if you're doing it well, it's an ongoing and iterative process anyway. So shouldn't be an issue in terms of speed of getting data exposed. In terms of transparency, I think that's all a function of what your policies are. It was mentioned earlier that in Europe and in the US and other places, personal data privacy is a huge concern. So they're a bit, over the top on regulations about transparency and about, making sure the wrong data isn't exposed to others. In other places, there's basically there is no privacy. So I'm not sure if I'm thinking in terms of transparency or if I'm addressing that right, but that transparency and degree of openness of your data is going to be a function of your decisions on your policies, not so much the actual process of whether it's non-transparent or transparent or open or closed. Those are decisions you make as part of your governance process. They aren't really the governance, they aren't the way you do the governance, they are the content of the governance. So that is a function of the type of government you have, the type of society you're dealing with. So, that's going to vary across countries and across organizations as well.
Dr. Sa?
I've been doing open data government for, more than 8 years now. And the goal of opening up government data is transparency, that's for sure. But we don't, stop at that. When you're opening up data, you make yourself transparent to the public. But also, we want the public to participate too, and eventually collaborate with the government. So Hong Sin, you can see, this is not just, make yourself transparency, but we're going to change the way we do things with our public or with our customers. Imagine the data would go both directions between your company and your partners and your customer in a way that would create co-creation way of doing things in the future. So I would imagine that if you do data governance, transparency would come naturally. Yeah, that's my view.
Okay, Ida, may I have your opinion on this?
Yeah, on the contrary, I think data governance, establishing the data governance framework and implementing it correctly will not impede transparency nor the speed that data will be given. So it really depends. In the Philippines right now, if the government agencies are quite clear already on their data governance policies, then data sharing will be more prevalent. No? Data sharing among government agencies, because there is already those guidelines on what data to share and how it will be shared. Then it will speed up data sharing among government agencies, and also as well the data that could be shared to the public, because there will now be no more the hesitations, because the guidelines are there, the policies are there. So I would think that participation or opening up the data of government agencies to the public would be better, or would be more, it will be practiced by more government agencies. Because right now in the ICT we have this open data portal, in which we encourage government agencies to post their open data, but there are still very few takers, because what they're saying is that they don't know if they can share those data that they have. They don't know what to share. So if the data governance framework is there already for these government agencies, then it will be it will be easier for the people who are in charge of data to share whatever data that they could share to the public. So I think that's why it's really very important, because it will define what the data managers can do or not do.
Excellent. Mr. Lan, may I get some feedback from you with regards to this on the speed and transparency of data governance, since you're working on the data flow, right?
Okay, I have no further. I think
Okay.
I think it's okay for me.
All right. Okay, allow me to do a wrap up for today's session, and I really like to thank all the distinguished plenary speaker for sharing their experience. And like what I should say, we are being very pragmatic, no hype, because we need to get data governance working across entire ASEAN. And there are definitely a lot of work. And I wrote down a lot of good input, starting from where we begin by talking about where to start and why. And the key conversation, or rather the key takeaway that I really like it personally is, what can we do to strike a balance in terms of like not too strict while we want to protect the data, and yet, to be able to open and explore innovation and put ASEAN in the competitive ground. And hearing about data being like, data is oxygen, that's what I should say, right? And data is power, that's what Mr. Lan says. And data is fuel, data is corporate asset, from the rest of the members. We all know, but it does take a lot of effort to continue this education in order to address what we call the data integrity, the data quality, the data assurance. So there are tremendous work to be done, in which also I'm looking forward to the conversation of ASEAN mentioning about, ASEAN Secretariat, Mr. Lan mentioned about the ASEAN certification, which also means that it opens up to a lot of other opportunities to the rest of the, to all the ASEAN member states. So moving forward, we actually have a lot of content that, that we have discussed. And another key takeaway is that if, data is governed, there is a very huge opportunities for every division, every businesses, and also every government agency. So, I'd like to again thank every one of you and allow me to mention a little bit about the next week live chat. Live chat 4 focuses, in fact, this has huge data. They're using a lot of data, but in the aspect of city development. You hear about building information modeling. This whole conversation started off in the European countries, and there are several technology vendors that provided this technology called building information modeling, and the subject is BIM, building information modeling and smart cities, and this falls in our cities and urbanization channel. Why is it a necessity, and what differences does it make to the future of cities where we all live in, right? So this whole conversation is about, how an intelligent 3D model-based process gives architecture, engineering, construction, professional, the insight and the tools to more efficiently plan, design, construct, or manage buildings and infrastructure. In fact, in overseas, or rather in the European or the US market, they start to talk about, instead of just building information modeling, they're already starting to advocate city information modeling. So this whole conversation has lots and lots and lots of data. So again, I'd like to thank all the speakers and our special guest, Mr. Lan, for joining us, and of course, our chairman, or rather our president, Kun Chaitulan, for also taking time to join this important session on data governance. So thank you all, and enjoy our short video of thank you video. Thank you.
Thank you.
ขอบคุณค่ะ And to the rest of the people, you can watch a replay or share the replay. The speakers will be sending you all the links and also a report on this whole data governance chat. Yes.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you very much. Goodbye. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.